I know we're all familiar with ChatGPT, some of the other LLM models from Anthropic, Google. I'm curious if each of you could talk a little bit about what models you've been implementing and what is actually working when it comes to using AI in the workforce.
We have a virtual investment analyst called Asimov that is built to consolidate information on firms, sectors, macroeconomic, private and public sources, and make portfolio analytics on top of it. For the client servicing, we have a chatbot embedded in Aladdin that can answer questions from Aladdin users on how to use Aladdin, the portfolio, the cash positions, the risk analytics, so it becomes an integrated part of the software offering.
Yeah, I'll answer this a little bit differently because obviously we're one of the providers of AI platforms. What I see in the market is actually sort of 3 layers of adoption happening, and different firms are at different points in their journey of adoption. So typically what we see is people adopting the Copilot, the M365 Copilot, that's the AI that's in the Office suite, and they get this general level of productivity across the entire employee base, or at least for the employees that use it. This is things like meeting summarization, document summarization, better search functionality across your files, things like that, email drafting and so forth. It's not anything groundbreaking, and I think most firms have kind of adopted it to some level. In fact, we know that statistically 75% of the Fortune 500 are using that platform now. The second layer I see typically after that is building some type of agent using our platforms that extends beyond the Office suite. And that usually brings a level of employee productivity in the HR, intranet, searching for policies, procedures, looking for information about, how to file an expense, book travel, those types of things. So there are agents now that people have built in companies to allow for that to be a lot easier. And then the third level of productivity I see is actually around more of the front office, back office types of business processes that you was just mentioning around different types of workflows. So if you're an investment analyst, or if you're working in a banking role, or if you're in a risk management role, there may be different types of agents that are available on third-party platforms that can work with Azure or that are homegrown and built using our platforms. And that allows for the business process to become a little bit more automated, faster, maybe reduce some of the manual errors. So those are kind of the 3 ways that I'm seeing most firms adopt AI currently. And then, of course, there's also firms that are trying to be even more innovative with, building multiple agents, agent-to-agent productivity. That's what we would call the frontier firm.
I'll make 2 comments, one of what we're doing internally and one what we're seeing from our conversation with asset managers and asset owners. One, what we're doing from a research, we have about 200 plus researchers on the investment due diligence side. We have about 45 people globally doing research on the operational due diligence side. When you think about that force, AI, the large language model has really been a force multiplier. From people that write detailed research reports to using LLMs to get through their day has really been a game changer. Whether it's assessing documents, whether it's writing language, there is a little bit of risk to that as we're going slowly to make sure it's not garbage in, garbage out. That ties to data. So that's what we're seeing with asset owners and asset managers. Those really kind of focused on good data hygiene, making sure that their organization is really, really tight with data. They're the ones that are really going to use this AI, large language models, as a strategic advantage to their business. Those smaller firms that may not be well as equipped as those larger managers are kind of playing behind the 8 ball and really are kind of faced with a decision. Do you buy or build? Do you get the talent organically to grow this, or do you leverage third-party partnerships in order to take advantage of this technology? So we do see a lot of haves and have-nots. We are looking and using large language models. For example, we have a proprietary built system, but it only accesses information that Mercer has. Now, Mercer happens to be a very large consultant agency with businesses across the industry, so there's a ton of internal information to be able to access. But if you're a smaller firm and don't have that robust data or research or information, you're not really going to benefit of that. We're allowed to use ChatGPT, but we have a compliance ring fence around it, meaning anything I put in there, I can't copy and paste confidential information. That's a control that Mercer's putting on part of this technology. And that's a best practice that we would like to see at asset managers. So it's a really, really interesting race right now. The more resourced are focusing on data and taking advantage of it.
It's kind of an interesting time, right? I'm old enough to remember, like, barely, but old enough to remember like 1990 when everyone was like still getting the personal computer. I remember when I got mine, right?
82.
And so when I think about 2025 with AI, I think about the same time period. It's about 80% adoption. People are still trying to figure out exactly how to work it. They're trying to integrate it into their businesses. To be honest, not everyone's successful. We've done some analysis on that, and right now we are seeing about 80 to 90% of the population of all of the companies really are just using an advanced search with ChatGPT. That's it. About 5% truly are getting to the point where they're actually outsourcing business processes. Now, the key breakthrough that we've seen is twofold. One, the newer models actually allow you attribution, right? It actually allows you to identify where the data is coming from, which allows people to intervene and check. The second is the contextual engineering, which then allows it to actually break down the incremental steps, which then allows humans better into the loop as it actually goes through its workflow and work process, right? You can actually check a JSON file. You can actually check the Excel that it puts out to. That allows the human to be in the loop and actually create a better outcome. What we're seeing now is the future, though, and what really creates a distinctive advantage for firms is one, proprietary technology or proprietary knowledge, just like other consulting firms, right? McKinsey has a treasure trove of over 40 years, 100 years, if you really go all the way back, of data, right? We understand how companies have operated. We understand what best in class looks like. Integrating that into our tools and allowing and training our models against that data set allows us to have a bit of a competitive advantage. The second thing is truly the operating model that you generate around it. Right, the models are going to continue to evolve. The ability of the model is going to continue to evolve. How do you adjust what you're allowing the model to do versus not? And then what is the governance that you put into place in the process, right? So with those contextual engineering spots, you can actually insert like a bias filter. You can insert a governance structure that says, listen, this is not in accordance with our organizational policy. Rewrite this. And the agent will do that for you. So those are the critical steps that you need to really start thinking about as you start bringing this into scale.
I think what you're saying about search is very interesting. Pre-large language models, you could go to Google and get a box and index all your data and have a search, like kind of essentially have an internal search, Google search engine, right? But Google search kind of hinges on PageRank, which requires cross links. Right, it's essentially a citation index. The most important thing is the one that has the most citations. LLMs don't do that, and they don't work that way. And your internal data doesn't work that way either. You don't have cross links in all your internal data. You just have a lot of documents. LLMs, by virtue of the fact that they work by syntactic similarity, they can group them together, which is sort of bringing the original Google model to your internal documents without needing all the cross links.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I think that most of the internal firm search don't work out that well because they are lacking this feedback loop and the sophisticated data indexing. But when people try to build a chatbot or like a sophisticated search on top, they realize now suddenly they need a good search engine that rank other things according to relevancy.
And I was being a bit flippant when I said that most people are already using it for search. Like if I talk about my mom or my kids, they are using it, right? Like it's just a glorified Google
You
search.
can't get away from using it from search. You go into Google, and that's the first thing it gives you is the AI response.
But when we really start talking about business utility of it, at this point, what you do is you can actually use the LLM to say, hey, how should I prompt you in order to solve this world-class problem? You do that a few times. And you start with whatever, the ChatGPT, the cheap one. And then you go down to the point that you literally have a 7-page prompt with insertion and intervention points. And then you feed that into the model. And that output is literally, it's similar to a first-year analyst. Right now, the key concept is you shift from being a doer to a reviewer. It doesn't necessarily eliminate the person in the loop. But the person that used to do all the analytics, the 4 hours to put together that first draft of the model, the LLM largely can do that with some contextualization. That person then is responsible for reviewing it. That's why you're seeing a reduction in the overall workforce, right? And you're seeing escalation of the workforce in the people that have some experience. You do need that dedicated experience judgment in order to really make LLMs thrive.
It puts a huge burden on the reviewer, right? As we become, in my job, as we become writers to editors, the skill set to write's a lot different than the skill set to review someone's writing and make sure it's right. We already have a case this year, right, of work that was hastily reviewed and provided to a government, and it was wrong, and very negative press around that. That's when we have these new shiny toys, as we're talking, we're so quick to run to use it, and we're feeling pressure from our boards and CEOs to use it now because there's so much CapEx in this space. We really need to slow down. For those that work in fiduciary channels like pensions or defined contribution, you have investment boards, you need explainability, right? If you're going to implement AI into your process, if you're an asset manager, you have to update your Form ADV Part 2. You got to think about these disclosures and think about when you're up in front of that chairman and performance isn't great, and you have to explain AI in your investment process. So really kind of synthesizing that, prompting is a skill, right? As we think about work, our jobs are fundamentally changing in how we do them, but how we think about them. And those skills and the jobs of the future are really going to be different. And I think prompting, compliance, empathy, communication, those are going to be the premiums in our space as we rush to implement this technology.